Maynard-Roberts, and welcome to the Rescue Podcast, where we help real people cope with real life through candid conversation and helpful information.
Now, last month we had our Rescue Us, the Lifeline of Forgiveness series. It was a 7-day marriage devotional series.
And there's a link in the description for anybody who missed it. You can check the description and get access to that 7-day marriage devotional series. So we know that life can be rough. Life can really be tough. And people always need help to overcome. The Rescue Us and the Rescue Me devotional series, coming out of both of those, we thought it would be good to have a conversation series to help some of the many people who may be struggling. We would have shared some of the word, we would have shared spiritual messages in the devotionals, and now we want to add to that by adding some real practical insight and some helpful advice to just come alongside some of those of us who may be struggling a bit. So over the next 5 months, we have one podcast that will be released monthly. And we will be looking at 3 major topics over these 5 podcasts. Help me keep my parents in mind. That's all about managing mental and emotional health while raising the special needs child. Then we're going to look at help. I am not coping strategies in times of crisis, how to combat depression and anxiety. And then today's topic, which is rescue my broken heart, forgiveness and the marriage in crisis. And we'll be on this topic for 2 episodes in the series.
Now today we have with us Ryan and Leona Clarke, and they have been married for 17 years and have 2 teenage sons. And of course their marriage has gone through many ups and downs, but today they bear the fruit of all of it because of the lessons they have learned along the way. Now, they attribute their success to maintaining their personal relationship with the Lord as they learn from Him how to love each other. Leona is a premarital and marriage counselor as she seeks to help couples avoid and overcome some of the pitfalls they went through.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Okay, so for our format today, we are going to do a little bit of story time first. And we're all going to share a story from our experiences. Have we ever had a broken heart? That's the topic for our little story time segment. Have you ever had a broken heart? And would you be willing to share a story from your life, a story from your experience of that broken heart? So who's going first? Ryan or Leona? Ryan or Leona?
Well, I think I'll open the baton.
Okay, go ahead.
Our marriage was off to a very rocky start. We had, as Bayo said, we had many ups and downs, trials and tribulations and so forth. So the emotional attachment and stuff was not there initially. So we had a lot of challenges there. And Leona, in search of that emotional attachment, got emotionally involved with a male friend. And witnessing that and seeing that, I was like losing my wife. You know, although it was not a physical relationship or what, but knowing that I was technically losing my wife, it brought some pain and suffering that I never felt before.
Okay. That's understandable entirely in that circumstance. What about you, Leona?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we've all suffered a broken heart in one way or the other, but in the context of the marriage, so many things have happened, where you just felt broken and felt like your needs were unmet. One experience that stands out for me, I remember we were going through one of our issues, which unfortunately back then kept us from talking or relating to others, sometimes for days on end. And during one of those experiences, I fell ill. And I remember going to the doctor. I had dengue and the flu at the same time.
Oh, boy.
That is just...
Is that possible?
I am telling you, it was like a double whammy.
Wow.
But whatever it was, Ryan was so angry and hurt, he didn't take care of me during that time. I felt so broken, so rejected, so whatever. And it really took us a while. to work through that, to process that kind of hurt and rejection, you know. And I'm sure we'll be able to tell you a little bit more about it as we go forward. But for me, that was one of those experiences for me where my heart was literally broken in the marriage in that situation. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead into the next segment of this podcast, and we have a bit of an interview that we want to do, but we're going to play a game, an interview game. So for those of you who are listening, you can't see, but I have some questions, and they're laid out before us on the table, and we are going to all be choosing from those questions and contributing to the answers. So who's going to go first?
Since Ryan started just now, I'll go ahead and start this time.
Okay.
Okay, so this question says, as human beings existing in this life, would you say that pain and hurt is inevitable as a part of life, and give reasons for your answer? Well, definitely. I think we can all agree that pain and hurt is inevitable. And if we keep it in the context of marriage, certainly because we are just different individuals, different people, different upbringings, our ideas and our expectations will clash at times. So that alone can bring some measure of pain and suffering. But even as we think about life in general, no growth happens outside of our comfort zone, right?
That is true.
And so outside of our comfort zone is usually a little painful, a little uncomfortable, a bit of suffering. And of course, as Christians, we understand the consequence of sin in contributing to pain and suffering, whether it be through death or just our selfish nature, you know, impacting somebody else. So definitely unavoidable.
It's like childbearing, right?
Yes.
When you have to go through all this pain
Exactly. To birth
to
something.
birth something beautiful,
Joyful.
you
Yeah.
know, and something joyful, and at the end of it, you will recognize that, well, you know, the pain was worth it. So,
Yes.
so maybe in marriages, you have to go through some difficulties in order to see the beauty of how relationships work. Just as you say, two different individuals from two different backgrounds learning to live each other. That could be a messy situation if not handled appropriately. You know?
Definitely, yes.
I agree with you both. And when we are in a marriage, I've often looked at marriage as a form of redemption, a form of God making us back into the person that we were originally intended to be. And like you say, the consequences of sin and having to come from that sinful being to the being that God really sees us as, or that he's creating us to be. And so what I found is that those aspects of ourselves that don't quite measure up to what God would want or what he would like us to be, those are the parts that he keeps cutting away at over time. And in our Christian relationship with him, if we keep steady with God, he will cut and he will do the work in us, but sometimes we have to go through some pain for that work to be accomplished.
Definitely.
Some pain for that to happen. So I totally agree with that for sure.
Yes, I agree totally with all the points being made, because we all are imperfect beings and subjected to making mistakes. The important thing is, what do we learn from these mistakes, and how do we go forward from these things?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. So who is going to go next, Mandaman?
In marriage, just like any other relationship, forgiveness is critical, especially in instances where the hurt is caused by your spouse. What is your views on this? Does forgiveness plays a role in healing our hearts? If yes, how? Yes, forgiveness is very important. It's the first part of the healing process. After forgiveness, we have to then be intentional. We have to go back to the place where we tend to reignite the passion and so forth. Do things that we used to do, that we used to enjoy and stuff, to get back to where we was before. Send flowers, regular texts,
Yes,
so
send me some
forth.
flowers. Send me some flowers.
And keep, most importantly, pray for each other and with each other.
Yeah. I am wondering, you know, because the question is asking whether or not forgiveness plays a role in healing our hearts. And I'm wondering if our hearts can truly be healed without the forgiveness. You know, because even as Christians, we understand what forgiveness does and how it eats you away at the inside out. And I think for a lot of people, whatever the relationship, sometimes because we are going along with life as normal, we think we're healed. And
yes,
so
yes.
let's say I'm thinking about my relationship with my
Yeah.
dad and him not being
Yeah.
there for me. Like, I've lived and thrived without him.
Yeah.
But really and truly, I recognize that many years later, I really wasn't healed from the trauma of his rejection. And so even today, I take rejection so personally, and the smallest thing I will interpret as rejection, and it hurts deeply. And so for me, I had to forgive him.
In order to move
But
forward,
there
yeah.
are still consequences of him not being there and all of that kind of situation. So I think there are some people who will say that they're fine and their heart is healed, but the forgiveness have not taken place. But then if they look deeply enough, they will
They will see.
realize that really
is-
healing hasn't taken place.
That is totally
Yeah.
true.
So
Yeah,
And
that's
the scripture tells us that we should guard our hearts
Yeah.
because out of it flow all of the
Issues
all
of
the issues of life, all the
life.
things that we do. And the thing is that if we examine our relationships carefully, not just our marriage relationship, but the relationships with the people around us, and we look at those areas where we struggle or where we have
Yeah.
conflict, we can see that sometimes it's connected back to pain that we have not addressed. Some of it, some people aren't even conscious of their pain or not even aware of the fact that I'm still hurting because although they're not crying and they're not depressed and they're not sad, they're not feeling it right now, but it's still impacting what they do and what they say and their actions. So that is a real part of the healing process. We have to dig up those things, those old wounds. We have to forgive who we need to forgive so that we can move forward and function properly in our relationships.
Yes, because we as Christians, we learn to mask our feelings and emotions a lot. We
Yeah.
tend not to open and share
That is
freely.
so true. That's an
like,
unfortunate part of church culture. You
Yes,
have to
like-
keep it together.
like some people, you'll be
Together.
going through torment, and some
Yeah.
people, so how you doing? I'm fine, highly blessed and highly
Exactly.
favored. That's one of the key things come out of a lot of our Christian mouth when we burning up inside with turmoil.
That is true.
That's so true. That's so
Yeah.
true.
Anything to add?
Not at this point. I mean, the points that are raised here concerning that is key. I think we hit the nail on the head concerning that. So,
All right.
All
So
right.
you can flow right into the next question.
all right. So the question I have is happily ever after. Childhood fairy tales and movies. Media might lead us to think that a fulfilled and happy marriage is completely without any kind of hardship or pain or heartbreak. Do you agree with this ideal? I always think that, I mean, even from my background as a media person, everything is made up on television. Hardly anything is real. So I don't think that what we see on television or what we see coming from the media is something that we should model for our own relationship because it doesn't speak to the reality or the hard facts of life. You know, when you look at various movies, you see when people get into a relationship, even before they get into a relationship, they meet the person on Monday, and by Tuesday, they're in bed together, and by Wednesday, they're married, you know? But that doesn't reflect on, the process of whether if this person is for you, whether if you want to be with that person, so clearly you have to look away from what you see on television that might appear to be glamorous. That doesn't speak in a true sense what really fulfilled marriages are all about. Because happy marriages comes after pain. Happy marriages comes after hardship. Even happy marriages, you get in happy marriages, especially when you hear from your grandparents who've been married for like 50 years, some 60 years, they say they went through a lot of heartbreak. So really and truly, we can't look at these fairy tales and media to gauge how our marriage or what our marriage should look like. So I don't agree that you should really, glean on anything that comes from the mass media.
And to be honest, I think that from the time you get married, I think you lose that one time. Like
The bubble is busted.
seriously, the bubble bursts.
Yeah.
From the time you get married, you get past the going down the aisle and the honeymoon and all that fun stuff. The bubble is burst, and you realize, okay, this is real. This just got real, and I have to find a way to make this work. So there's that whole process that you're gonna have to go through after that of deconstructing in your mind the idea that, oh, happily ever after, you get married and there are no problems, you get married and it's a bed of roses. No, there's something that you're going to have to work on and work through when you have two people from, like you said before, different backgrounds coming together. There's going to be conflict at some point in time, and there are going to be situations that you're going to have to work out. So
amazingly,
definitely.
Jewelle, even from a premarital perspective, sometimes that process of planning the wedding bursts that bubble.
That is so true.
Conflicts begin to come in the planning process, and in-laws come in.
Oh my goodness.
Personality.
Yes.
So the bubble can be busted
That's so
even
true.
before you actually say I do.
True.
You know how many people come close to divorcing before they actually get married?
Yes, especially over the wedding list. Like, who is supposed to come to the wedding? Like this auntie from this distant family line and all kind of things.
Yeah, for Ryan, it was all the thousands of people that he went to school with.
I'm my goodness.
How do you know all these people? So yeah.
Yes, but in these fairy tales, they start with the end first and then work backwards. Real life, you work towards that happy ending. Right? And in real life, you have to deal with a lot of issues. Paying bills, balancing finances, children, and all those issues that you would not deal with in a fairy tale.
No, definitely not in an hour-and-a-half movie for sure.
When they work
they take up all of that part.
Doesn't have time to go through those intricacies,
So they leave you to think, well, that just worked itself out.
And
then we're here.
But I think that you really do get a happy marriage when you get to a stage where you can communicate and talk through your issues and so forth and bring resolution
to
situations and so forth. You're not, will they always be happy? No, because as I say, life issues would come along.
Okay, so the next question says, in the context of marriage, where you are living in close proximity, does that closeness make a heartbreak more difficult to resolve or easier to resolve? When I was thinking about this, I wrote these questions, so it's really unfair probably that I get to answer some of them. But anyway, when I was thinking about this, I was saying, this depends because there are different personality types and people process pain differently. That's number one. And then number two, people come from different backgrounds and different conflict cultures in terms of how conflict is addressed in their background. So, for example, I come from a home, in my parents' house, they resolve conflicts quickly. So when something happens, that resolves the same day or maybe the day after at the most. But I can only probably think of one instance in the entire 30-something years of my parents' marriage that I am aware of because, well, I guess they probably would not have disclosed all their conflicts to us as kids, but I can only think of one single instance where I recall there was something that may have been a little bit more prolonged than just 1 or 2 days. So for me, I deal with things quickly. My thing is, look, we need to get past this because we need to live life. We have things to do. We have stuff to do together. We can't be here in this position for all this time. I just don't do that very well. And I'm very uncomfortable with ongoing conflict. I am also a person who does not really like confrontation to begin with, so I just like to get it over with if I need to. So to me, living in proximity works out for the better for me because I'm like, you're right there. I see you every day. You're next to me on the pillow. Let me just talk about this thing and get it over with, But that isn't everybody. There's some people who, for them, living in proximity might be the opposite. For them, dealing with their heartbreak may be harder because you're there. It's like seeing you all the time and they just can't, they haven't been able to process it or haven't been able to deal with it. For some people it's easier and some people it's harder. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if anybody else thinks similar or different.
Well, to me, I think it's a bit easier.
Okay.
On a different level because technically I'm there, and as you say, they like to resolve issues quickly. But I, on the other hand, sometimes I can hold on the issue, or used to hold on the issue very, very long. Right?
I wish
But-
we had a camera and y'all could see the body language and the hand signals going on right now.
Yes, but seeing the person every day and know that they're hurting and so forth tend to
Yeah.
force you to make a
address.
conscious choice, especially if you have that love and affection towards the person, to address the issue even before you're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
but let me just say, especially in the context of Ryan and I, where we thought we resolved issues because we continued with life, raising children, paying the bills, even getting back, intimacy and everything, but we really didn't resolve the particular issue. So sometimes the close proximity can mask like forgiveness, like we cool, we talking, we whatever. Like sometimes when I bring Ryan will be like, but everything is fine. And I'm like, are you in the same marriage? Like, because I'm not fine. We didn't talk about this. You just like 2 or 3 days later, you come like, hi, babes, let's talk about the weather. So now that we've spoken about the weather and we slept together last night and we went to church on Sunday, the assumption is that everything is fine. So even in close proximity, we have to be very careful with that. I remember going through a time where all I wanted was a separation. But I think like you is like, it would have probably been like an opportunity to process. But I think there was also the fear that if I separate, I wouldn't want to come back. Because that is a very real fear for marriage. So I think close proximity challenges us to do that, but we have to make sure that we've actually done the process of forgiveness and not just mask it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it can't be just a verbal thing. You have to really
Talk about
do
what
the work. We have to really talk
happened.
about it.
Say
It
I'm
can't
sorry
be-
if you need to.
Yeah,
and
because as I say, the key to that too is knowing your spouse. Because Leona is a talker. She is a talker. You understand? I like to get to the point and finish with
That's
that.
it.
But Leona would search why, where, when, how, and all the.
Maybe that's the counselor in me, right? But we have to get it out. And also because we don't want to get back there, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's
Yeah,
a process.
that's-
It helps to work through the
Yeah,
issues.
yeah. Those are very important points, and I was just listening to to your point, Leona. That is something I have struggled with in terms of dealing with the issue, because when you think that you haven't really resolved the issue, but probably a day later or hours later, you come back as if everything was normal, and I mean nothing else drives me crazy, but
Yeah.
but I'm saying I think for there to be some kind of resolution, there has to be yes, there has to be a conversation between the two, and I think there has to be some level playing field, so you will hear my side, I will hear your side, and let's find out the truth or the root of where this whole situation found out and came out, and resolve it from there, rather than try to put up this prideful attitude or this defensive attitude, and you're going down the road and you're just not seeing clearly as to what the issue is. So what you say there is very, very important.
Definitely.
That is very key what you just said there just now. But in doing that, you have to find a safe space. Because, as I said, sometimes when we try to talk it out, depending on where we are at, as I said, level of hurt and so forth, sometimes it turns
may
to
not be a safe
confrontation.
space. Yeah.
Right? So we developed this thing called pillar talk, where anything said, we deal with it as it is.
And it cannot be
no
used
judgment
against you
or
in a
anything,
court
and
of
it
law.
can't be used against you.
I like that. Maybe we should adopt that. Pillow talk.
Yes, and it cannot be used against you anytime later or in a court of law. It's like this is
This is it.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is it. Yeah. When
And
we
no
finish here,
confrontation comes back from
And
anybody
don't take
as a
any
result. No
offense.
consequences.
Don't
no
punish me
offense.
tomorrow. Don't whatever.
This
So
is
it is a safe
yeah,
space.
you're free to say what you want to say, and we give you a bit of leeway to say it probably how you want to say it.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're still working through it because sometimes Ryan will just be like, okay, let me think about this before I actually say it. And I'm like, just say it raw. I will try not to be offended, because you really want to be
hear,
able to get it out. And sometimes raw is, unfortunately, the truth, but then when you try to polish it over, it's like, well,
you don't quite
whatever.
say what
I
you
know,
should have said.
Yeah, so sometimes what you really want to say is, you're an idiot. Like, I don't know why but you want to say, well, babes, I felt like you were kind of not being a non-idiot in this situation. So you really try to polish it up nicely, but so pillow talk really has been something that we developed, and it's really working for us.
Okay, so hear that, listeners. Some pillow talk, implement that. That sounds like great advice. All right, next question.
So I have a question here. It says, what advice would you give to a husband or wife who is currently nursing a broken heart as a result of the words or actions of their spouse? How can a husband or a wife begin to heal from a broken heart? So for me, the beginning is also always to just decide to heal. Like, I need to accept that I'm hurt. And before sometimes you're hurt, and depending on what it is, the reality is that you are going to remain in the marriage. So that divorce is not an option here. So if we're going to remain in this marriage, we're going to remain married. We're not going to mask this thing. I say to Ryan, marriage can either be a little bit of heaven on earth or a little bit of hell on earth. And we choose, like every day, we choose. And I think living with a constant conflict or broken heart is like living in hell.
Exactly.
So I have to decide that I need to forgive you and get over the broken heart. Now, in the process of this conversation, obviously, there are times when somebody hurt you and they don't think that you should have been hurt. So they don't even see the need to ask for forgiveness. And then as Christians, we know that we need to forgive whether the other person wants it, seeks for it, And when it happens in a marriage, we feel it so much deeper because there are so many emotions involved. And you're in the space with this person, you're raising children with this person, you're interacting on a spiritual level with this person. And so there is so much more involved. But because I am the one with the broken heart, the decision is first mine. I need to heal. If Ryan chooses to help me with that process of healing, great. It will probably happen faster. But if for some reason he doesn't, because of his maturity level, where he is spiritually, his experience, whatever it is, I still need to decide that I need to heal and be intentional about my healing. So whether it be that I need to seek counseling for myself, this is what has happened, I need to work through this, my husband is not willing to talk about it, but I need help with it, I need to do that. I always believe whatever you feed will grow. So when I want to forgive and when I want to heal,
you have to feed the
I
forgiveness.
flood my mind and my heart with verses and songs and things of forgiveness. And obviously the memory that God himself forgives me daily, and that doesn't necessarily make it easier. That's the truth. It doesn't always make it easier. But whatever we feed will grow. If I feed the anger, the frustration, the fact that he got me vexed, I mean, we've experienced it, right? Where, we're fighting over one thing, and every little thing you do now makes me angry. Right? Because that's what we're feeding. We're feeding the anger, and we're feeding the hurt. So
and you're processing that in your mind and seeing
Even
everything
even calling her name.
that.
It's like you come in and I'm like, what? Just the whole like.
What do you want now?
I know. Or my phone rings and
calling me again.
I've caught myself with that initial reaction. So we have to be careful what we're feeding. But don't get me wrong. Definitely healing from a broken heart and forgiveness can be a process. It can be it's not a one-time thing. And there may be situations where I have to say to myself on a daily basis, moment by moment, I forgive Ryan, I forgive Ryan, I forgive Ryan. Like feeding my brain or reminding myself.
Come back to the decision that you made.
Definitely. And then work through the process.
Yeah, I agree completely, because it is so challenging when you are in that state of brokenheartedness. Sometimes you don't feel as though you can get past it. Sometimes you feel as though this is it. I am done. Like, I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I can move to tomorrow in this relationship. And you really have to come to that point where you decide, this is a marriage that I'm in. I want my marriage to work. I want to make it to the next, we're at 10 years now. I want to make it to the next 10 years and however long God is going to give me. So I'm going to decide today that I'm going to forgive and I'm going to move past it. And like you said, it's a a process. It's something you have to go through. Every day you have to work on that and keep your mind in that position so that you actually accomplish what it is that you set out to do.
Yeah, and as Leona was saying before, you have to be intentional about your actions also. Because if I know I hurt Leona and she's angry, from the way she relate to me, I can tell if the anger is still there or so forth. Although she may say she forgive me. But from her reaction and response, I can tell, well, she's still vexed. So let me give she space or whatever. Because I was very good at that. You know, sometimes I give her too much space because I will let it meander, and don't deal with the issue. Right? Which was not very healthy. And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Great points. Oh, well, I was just thinking that if we keep our minds on the covenant we made with God through our marriage vow, and I always say whoever created that marriage vow had some serious insight about what marriage is all about, because it talks about for better or for worse, and we have to qualify what that worse means, and at the same time, what are we prepared to do when the worst comes? Because what the vow encourages us to do is that we have to stick to it even in that period when it is very bad, when it is worse. So it should bring us to a place, first of all, that we have to remember that, you took this man or took this woman to be your husband or wife. You did this in front of hundreds of people. That's if you had big weddings, witnesses and stuff. But you did it before God, who honors and takes covenants, seriously. And so if we go with that mind thinking that, I am doing this, especially when we remember, I think it was in Ephesians 5 that talks about, submitting to yourselves to one another. If we go into that marriage, especially when there are, conflicts, and we keep in mind that I still have to remain submissive to my husband or submissive to my wife, even though I just don't feel like being with him or her anymore. I think that we honor God by, fulfilling that mandate of love that is required for us to, get the marriage to continue, basically.
Definitely. I can tell you this, even as you refer to the Bible, you refer to the word, and I think you read it in our bio. Our relationship works best when we are maintaining our personal relationship with God. When we read about what God says about marriage, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. So your first focus is Christ. Wives, see to it that you respect your husbands as unto God. So that when Ryan does not deserve respecting, the as unto God deserves happening. And so it is like, Lord, I am going to respect this man because I love you, because I want to obey you. And so he empowers you and gives you the strength to do that. It's not always easy. But for me, I'm not always going to be lovable. But if Ryan says, Lord, you want me to love this woman as you love your church gets rebellious, your church moves away from you, your church, as she is doing in this situation, and so show me how to love her, show me how to think. So I think that focus for me and even when Ryan gave his experience in terms of me being emotionally attached to somebody else and so on, looking back on that situation, I was moving away from the Lord. And I don't think it happened that because of this relationship, I moved away from the Lord. I got into this relationship because I moved away from the Lord. So the moving away happened first. And so now I'm very conscious, and if I feel my mind waving or something happening in the relationship or not forgiving quickly enough and so on, while there is all the self-evaluation, there's the evaluation of where am I in terms of my relationship with the Lord. So for me, that's a benchmark that I'm using now.
And I think that brings us right to the next question. that.
Yeah.
I think Ryan has the next question.
Yeah, so how does our faith come into all
Yes,
this?
yeah.
Yeah.
that
Does
ties
our
right into
faith in
that.
any way help us to get past a broken heart? Yes, definitely it does. Our faith is our foundation to our whole being, right? It teaches us God's love for us that we can transfer to our spouse, and basically it is a guideline.
Definitely. I mean, we talking about standards, right? What are the standards for living? One of the things that I found about the world standards, and I know there may be people listening to this podcast who are not Christians, and they will be like, yeah, but we know how to forgive each other, we know how to whatever, but really forgiveness and understanding forgiveness is something that comes from God Himself. Is as we read that God is love, a lot of people think they love and they know what love is, but unless you know the source of love, and unless you've accepted that forgiveness that is given to us, the fullness of what it is and what it entails, sometimes we don't really get to experience it. So our faith definitely becomes the foundation by which we live, and what gives us the strength to go forward when it's difficult.
Yes, and as Leona was saying there just now about love, because we were talking to some young people the other day about love and courtship and so forth, right? So we was telling them they don't understand the meaning of love, because you take for instance between 16 and 25, they may be in love with 20 different people.
That's true.
Just to be conservative,
Fall in love.
because love.
More infatuation than
Yeah,
anything
more
else.
infatuation.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a word that some people use.
Yeah.
They don't have a clue what it really
is.
is,
No.
right? Because as Leona said, if you don't know what's God's love, you can't comprehend what is love.
It's true. It's true.
All right, and that brings us to our last question.
All right, so the last question is, if you are willing, share a healed heart testimony from your life. Can be generally, does not need to be within marriage specifically. I didn't have a great relationship with my father. It was a tumultuous one. And I didn't feel loved or wanted. And he was never really there for us. He wasn't there for when we got married. He wasn't there when I graduated, from school. And those things broke my heart. But, because Christ lived in me, I forgave him. And for all the things that was said to me and the way how I was treated, I didn't feel I wanted to be part of him. I didn't want to be seen as his son. As a matter of fact, there was a time I was so ashamed of him that I didn't even want to walk with him on the road or even sit down in his car. But I was healed after having completed school and having matured and understand what Christ's love is and going back to him. As a matter of fact, before I even went to Bible school, there was an incident that, took place where it got physical. And I had to, before I even got to Bible school, I had to apologize. And I did so, but I went to Bible school with this hurt and anger in my heart, knowing that I went through all of this and I was not even treated like a person. I was treated less than a person. So, but after that experience and having an encounter with Christ and understanding what kind of loving Father He is and how He died for me and even for my father as well, and the call for us to love one another, I had to find it deep in myself to really love my father and go back to tell him, Dad, I have great respect for you. I love you, as my dad. So I know my heart was healed and from that, and I know that I could feel comforted by the fact that I did forgive him and did tell him that before he, passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
That's truly amazing. I know I definitely have the whole daddy experience and issue, but I want to, from my healed heart story, I want to continue from the story I gave at the beginning, where I was, ill and Ryan didn't take care of me. And for me, even the rejection and the hurt that I felt then or feel at any point in it stems from my own father's story, right? But once Ryan and I were able to talk about it, and again, just recognizing, his reaction was as a result of his experience, how he had learned to deal with issues, because if his father vexed with you, he just vexed with you. It doesn't matter if So he learned some of those things, and then we talked about it. We talked about how it made me feel and that kind of thing. And so going forward in the marriage, I think Ryan has been very intentional. Whenever I'm ill, to the point of going overboard, taking care of me, bringing the medication, bringing whatever, almost like to try to erase the memory of that negative thing. So, and, just being able to apologize and so on. So really and truly working through it and recognizing it wasn't something done, let me say, on purpose, from the point of view that it was a learned behavior. And unlearning behavior sometimes is really difficult. You talked earlier about how God molds us and so on. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of that molding happens in our marriage. It happens with the use of our spouses, to erase some of those rough edges and so on. And so that was one of those times, I think. But I have been able, so now I can talk about it and not feel that hurt, not feel that pain. It's just an experience that I'm relaying. But knowing how we were able to go through that process. But it was difficult, and I think it went on for a good few months, maybe even a year later. I probably mentioned it because I really took it very personally. And I think sometimes as a woman, I think I got even the mindset again. Our past matters. Maybe at some point we will get to talk about all of that, because I came from a past that forced me to be very independent. And out of that situation, I decided, well, if I could take care of myself, then I don't need you. Like when I needed you most, you were not there. So already I had that very independent thing where, the word submission kind of made me cringe, because it just wasn't a natural part of who I am.
Not only
and then you added to that by making me feel like when I needed you most, you weren't there. So I'm like, well, I don't really need you. And when that begins to play out in a marriage, it's not pretty. It can create a lot of conflict. I'm doing my own thing. You can't tell me anything, whatever. And so we really had to work through that process. But today we sit here and I can testify that I'm healed of that particular situation.
Amen.
And a lot of others that really came up in our marriage over the years.
Amen.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yes, I also gonna set going back to my story from the beginning, because after that hurt and pain and stuff, after the communication and really reconciling and so forth, then I was able to then even express love more freely to Leona on a more constant basis and that sort of stuff, because I understand then more of what she needed, because as she was mentioning before, I learned a lot of behaviors from my dad. Because my dad don't believe in flowers. My dad don't believe in all that stuff. He would tell you, before you take out the wife to dinner, go and buy chicken and bake in the oven and take home and don't get the restaurant. No expression of love, no flowers, nothing. Why buy flowers that can die in 2 days and that sort of stuff. Right? So, I come up with that kind of macho mentality and that sort of stuff. And one of Leona or Lorraine, which I usually calls her, love languages is gifts and affection. Those are two that I can tell you that she really deserves.
Right.
All right. So this has been a great conversation.
Yes, it
I'm
was.
sure you all would agree.
Yes, it was.
And we really want to thank Ryan and Leona Clarke for joining us for this first episode of the Rescue Podcast. And today our topic was to rescue my broken heart, forgiveness, and the marriage in crisis. So thank you so much to Ryan and Leona. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
For being here today. All right, I just want to remind all of those of you who are listening to us today. Last month, as we mentioned at the beginning, we completed the Rescue Us devotional series. It's a 7-day devotional series, and there's a workbook that accompanies it, and you can get it at www.therescuelifeline.com. www.therescuelifeline.com. There's going to be a link in the description that you can click straight through and get to that devotional series, just in case you missed it. So, I am Jewelle Maynard-Roberts.
And I'm Ricardo Roberts.
This has been episode 1 of the Rescue Podcast, a 5-part audio conversation series to help real people cope with real life. Look out for our next episode, which airs the end of April. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.